Hello and welcome to Ignore the Bell. I'm Nathan and I've got a special guest today, Woody from Toy Story. Woody, how are you doing?
Somebody poisoned the water hole.
Oh, how would you know that? Did somebody actually die from drinking the water?
There's a snake in my boot.
Oh no. Well, I guess that's better than there being a boot in your snake, which I've seen online before. There's a boot in my snake. So this is going to be the Toy Story episode. However, we're not going to get into Toy Story 4. We're planning to do a separate podcast entirely on that. And I have not seen Toy Story 4 yet, but we do have a sponsor for today's episode. So our sponsor is Mattel.
Well, not actually Mattel. It's actually a smaller company that was purchased in a leveraged buyout.
Oh, well, same difference. So a smaller company that was purchased in a leveraged buyout by Mattel is our sponsor. Go out and buy products from said subsidiary. All right, folks, I hope you enjoy the podcast.
You're my favorite deputy. Ah.
Oh man, I wish this discussion could go on forever.
Ignore the bell. We're gonna keep going, people.
All right, so we are talking about the first three Toy Story films. Have you seen Toy Story 4 yet?
No, not yet. I'm planning on seeing it, I think, tonight.
Okay.
So we'll see. It just came out this past weekend, and I am excited for it, even though it does feel unnecessary.
That's an interesting point. Yeah. Yeah, I definitely feel like it's unnecessary as well. But because Toy Story 3 ends so well. It really ends the franchise in just the perfect way. So before we get into that, we were briefly talking. Basically, I've had this idea of it's sort of like on The Office. It's which character are you? And everybody, I've been saying this for a while. Everybody wants to believe that they're a Jim or a Pam, but ultimately, we've got a lot of Tobys, we've got a lot of Kellys, we've got a few Merediths out there, a lot of Kevins, right? And so it's like everybody wants to be those characters and they identify with them. Oh, I'm definitely that character. But I don't think that's actually true. So we're talking like, who are you? Like, who do you identify with more? Is it like Woody or Buzz? And I think like everybody who watches Toy Story is going to feel the same way. Like, oh, definitely Woody. And it's like,
right.
Yeah, but there's definitely a lot of people who think they're Woody, but they're really Buzz.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because if I were to like really think which character I'm most similar to, it would probably actually be Rex.
Yeah, I can see that.
Roar! Did I scare you?
Right. Yeah. I would say like most of the time, I'm probably a solid Mr. Potato Head. I'm just a grump. I just get angry. I'm always pointing out negative things. I don't know how well you can tell from the podcast, but knowing me in real life, it's like, oh, he's got some Mr. Potato Head in him.
I could totally see that.
Yeah. I kind of insult people. And
what are you looking at, you hockey puck?
Right, exactly. Yeah, that's probably like my spirit toy.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so these three films then that we're going to be talking about. Toy Story, the original came out in 1995, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
Toy Story 2 in 1999, and then Toy Story 3 was in 2010.
Okay.
So yeah, there was quite a gap there.
Yeah.
But I mean, as we said, like Toy Story 3 does a perfect job of like bringing finality to a trilogy of films, which it would probably have been like my absolute favorite trilogy of all time if it were just a trilogy. But now there's a fourth one. I don't know.
So are you not excited about Toy Story 4?
I am cautiously optimistic.
Oh, okay.
I am very, very excited. I definitely want to go see it. I think that it raises a lot of interesting questions that have sort of been in the background before about, like what is a toy? How like like the fact that Bonnie is like their new owner is creating Forky, which is a spork,
Right.
and then like it just comes to life. I'm like, oh, okay, so wait, so what is a toy? I have so many questions.
Yes, there's definitely a lot of questions with that. I feel like Toy Story is one of those films where it works so well when you're just caught up in the whimsy of it, right?
Mhm.
That they're just these whimsical films where you, like, don't think too much about the logic behind it and just buy into it and go along for the experience, and you're just going to have a great time. But it's almost functioning like a metaphor. The more you look at it, the more flaws you start seeing in the logic behind it. You're like, wait, that doesn't actually add up, right? That a metaphor
Right.
works on a really shallow level, but the second you start saying, and that means this, and that means this, and that means this, and you're like, it just falls apart. Any metaphor or allegory just falls apart if you get too close to it. And I feel like Toy Story's been dealing with that. Like, there's so much tension and suspense in these films is them, you know, being in danger of all of these different things. And I'm like, well, like, what would kill you? I'm very confused by this because if you're looking at the original Toy Story, then you've got Sid who's doing these operations on these toys and
Yeah.
assembling them together. And it's like, okay, if you had two different toys and you take the head off of one and you put it onto the body of the other one, what is that now?
Right. Yeah.
Because it's still a
Where's the
toy.
nerve center of the
Right. Right. That's exactly what I'm saying. And so then like you get into like this, sporky character that it's like, okay, but if a kid plays with a box, does that mean
Right.
that a box is a toy? And there's other questions too. One of the things that I really wonder about is, you know, what happens with so you have all of these different toys, but they don't seem to have the same level of intelligence. So where is that coming from? Because it's like the baby toys are not as sophisticated as toys for older kids. Do you know what I'm
Right.
talking about? And
Yeah,
so I'm
I
like,
do.
so why does like Sporky seem so intelligent if like
Why is he so paranoid? I'm not a toy. I shouldn't exist. What? Like
right?
this is all like from like the first teaser, like the
Yeah.
first teaser for the film. And I don't know how deep they're going to go into, all those questions. But yeah, no, it is an interesting question, one that obviously a lot of people have theorized about over the years. And I think like film theory just recently came out with a theory talking about, um, how essentially like it appears that the toys, uh, they are given life by like the love of a child. So like when they're on store shelves, then they, maybe can get like a little bit of life off of like the kids walking by and being excited about the toy, which is why like in, Al's Toy Barn in Toy Story 2, then like the one Buzz Lightyear comes to life briefly. Um, but then, like once it has like a full owner, then that's like, full of life. And then I don't know what that means for, if they get abandoned in the attic, do they eventually just run out of life and die
This is
or
what I'm
what?
saying is that the films it starts with such a fun little premise, but it's almost like an SNL skit that then gets turned into a movie. It's like it's really funny for 4 or 5 minutes, but if you try to turn it into a 90-minute thing, then you're like, this isn't working anymore. And that's my only concern really with like Toy Story 4. But even just in general, then it's like the more they try to get into those questions about like the ontological question of like what constitutes the humanity of a toy, or getting into the relationship between the toy owner and the toys, and getting into like big metaphysical philosophical questions. Once you start getting into that, then I think the entire franchise is in danger, in a dangerous territory once it starts doing
Yeah.
that. When it's just, okay, they are alive, they've got these goals, they've got this mission, we've got to get back home and we're going on this adventure, this quest. And it's like, it works really, really well there in the dynamics between the characters. But when it starts trying to tackle those bigger things, that's when it's just like, ooh, pump the brakes. Like you're not going to, you're writing yourself into a corner here.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. So I do want to talk about how influential the original Toy Story was, though. I mean, it came out in 1995 when, like, it is the very first completely computer-generated feature-length film. Um, and of course now that's all we get out of Disney, DreamWorks, everything like that. Um, but I mean, having said that, like Toy Story, it has a lot of special things that most films nowadays don't. But the original Toy Story was also very short. I believe it was like 88 minutes or something, and a lot happens in that time. But
Yeah.
it's not that long of a movie, and I think
Yeah, it
that's
says the
really.
running time is 81 minutes.
Oh my
Wow.
goodness.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And for it to be this, thing that spawned, three other feature films, like the sequels,
Yeah.
in addition to basically like being the legs for this studio, which did not originally start out as a movie studio.
What did they
They
start out as?
just as a computer program like developer. Um,
Okay.
and so they were like, oh yeah, here's like this 3D modeling software. You could use it for this, that, or the other. And it wasn't going all that well. But every year, in order to show off their technology, then they would create this little short film. And so the short film would be shown at, oh man, I forget what the name of it is. But some like film, or not film, some like technology convention sort of thing. And everybody would, you know, start like after a couple of years, and people would start just looking forward to the Pixar short films.
Right.
And then eventually, somebody was like, you guys should just, make a feature film. And they're like, ah. So then they made Toy Story, inspired by one of their short films, Tin Toy, I think, which I've watched, and it has a horrifying, like low quality aesthetic to it. The baby in it is just terrifying, honestly. Um, and yeah, and to see them like come so far with the technology that they had available in as few years as they had, like because Toy Story was groundbreaking,
Mm-hmm.
like absolutely, and the fact that they did that, with their first attempt at a feature length uh, film, and that it has so much heart to it, that it has such a compelling story, that there are no moments of like, I mean, people might correct me, but there aren't any moments that I can think of where, things go through other things, like phase through other things, which is something that has happened with more recent films, including Frozen. Um, I know that in that film, then like her hair like goes through her arm.
Oh.
Um, yeah, during like the Let It Go song, I think. So it's like a big moment, and her hair just like goes right through her arm, and they're just like, it's fine. And then, like you look back at Toy Story, you're like, I guess I can think of one moment, which is like when they are going down through the little uh, front door light, then they push the light down and then bring the entire light back up through the hole. But I'm like, wait, but how is it secured there?
Right.
Yeah. So that's I am always fascinated by just how much they were able to do, as the first of its kind.
Yeah, and I remember that when people first, like when Toy Story first came out, vaguely remember there being some concern with this because it is the first computer animated film, um, where there was the concern was, okay, is this what all kids movies are now going to be? And I think that, and ultimately that has proven true, right? That
Yeah.
really is where we're at, and really ever since then. Um, and I think that legitimately there is a concern with that. And part of the concern is that you have essentially lost an art form, right? In terms of cinema. Now, you're still getting traditionally animated um, TV shows, right? That seems to be, in fact, more popular than ever. But you're not getting that in terms of feature-length films that are going to the box office.
Yeah. Yeah.
Be-
Absolutely.
because and it's really showing up more for adult comedies. And so I mean, I'm
Mm.
just like briefly trying to like go through it, but the ones that immediately jump to mind would be, since Toy Story came out, then you get King of the Hill, you get Family Guy and all the spin-offs of that, like the Cleveland Show. You've now got on Netflix a whole bunch of them, like F is for Family, which is Bill Burr's show. You've got Big Mouth on there, Paradise PD, whatever South Park is, and Archer, and Pacific Heights, and and I know like BoJack Horseman, and I know there's a bunch of others too. Futurama would be another big one, of course, in there.
Mhm.
And so you look at that, and you're like, it's interesting the way that older style of animating, of traditionally animating something, has just carried on in terms of adult comedies, but then it's disappeared from movies for kids and even TV shows for kids, because they're still doing computer generated TV shows for children.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. It's very, very odd to see that transition. Disney, the king of hand-drawn animation, doesn't do that anymore. Their last one, I think, was like The Princess and the Frog, um, which I don't even know like what year that came out, but it was, a number of years ago.
Yeah.
Uh,
Okay. Sorry about that. I think it was really from when you mentioned Frozen that you literally froze the screen. You manifested that into existence just by saying. That's how powerful Frozen is. What a phenomenon it
Oh
has become.
yes, yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, so I feel like there's definitely something to this idea that, because Toy Story, on the one hand, has brought in this new era of this new aesthetic within
Mhm.
cinematic history, where you've got computer animated films. And anytime you do that, like, it's not like we've got that and traditionally animated films anymore. It's just replaced that entirely. And I'm trying to think, like, when else has that ever happened? I mean, aside from like the transition from silent films to sound, because you can't even
Mm.
say the same thing with black and white to color, because for one thing, I don't like, there is definitely an aesthetic that gets lost. And the color films, like the early color films, I don't know if you like talked about this in your film studies classes, but I know we talked about it a lot, that the actual film stock was a lot better in black and white and than it was in the early color films.
Mm.
And that the quality, like the actual picture quality, if you're looking at it, let's say like I don't know, 1939, let's say, like, which is one of the most important years in cinematic history, like between Gone with the Wind and Citizen Kane and
Yeah.
Wizard of Oz and all of that, right? But if you're looking at Gone with the Wind compared to Citizen Kane, look at the two of them, because Gone with the Wind, as best I remember, that's color, right? Have you not?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, but you compare that to Citizen Kane, and then you can see that like that black and white
Yeah.
is actually, you're getting more um, like color gradients, even though it is black and white. Like, you're getting a fair bit there, and the clarity is better, and just the film stock itself was better until like ultimately color caught up, and then clearly like we've surpassed what black and white was doing. So I'm like, maybe that would be a comparable moment in film history, but I still don't think it's the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, like now, a lot of studios are going to digital cameras instead of, or have already gone to digital instead of film stock. Um,
Yeah, I
so
mean, but even that, I don't know because it's still live action, so you're still capturing live action. Definitely, the
yeah,
aesthetic has changed, but I don't think it's as dramatic as this was drawn by hand by an artist to this was digitally animated.
yeah,
Because that's a really big difference.
oh,
And
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it requires a whole different set of skills, and I mean, like people who could draw things by hand, then they can't necessarily animate on a on a computer, and so you're losing the aesthetic of it as well as losing uh, the artistry of drawing by hand, animating by hand. Um,
right. That's what I'm saying is that it's such a particular art form, and it's one of those art forms where it's not that it's disappeared, but it's certainly not as common as it used to be. And because even in the like I remember when Mulan first came out, then people talked about just how stunning it is to see like all of the soldiers who are coming over that hillside on
mm,
horseback and how they're all drawn by hand. Or when the Lion King came out, then like seeing video of the artists in the studio there in like Disney's studio where they actually had a lion or multiple lions in studio, and they're just like there are these artists who are trying to
yeah.
capture, and that's their subject, and trying to get the movements exactly right. And it's that has like you're not getting that with adult animated TV series. You know what I mean? Like they're not doing
Right.
that with like Family Guy saying, "Ooh, let's get this like let's let the artistry is so important here." It's like, no, really this is just a vehicle for conveying jokes, right? And some of the jokes
Right.
are visual, and I'm not saying that like there's no that it's not important what the artists are doing on shows like that, but it's not the same thing that I'm saying as a particular kind of art form, then that has essentially been replaced by digital animation. And that seems really significant that it's Toy Story that does that, because Toy Story on a story level is ultimately playing out a lot of those things. There's so much to do with nostalgia, so much to do with you cannot stay in this moment forever, right? That
Right. Yeah.
children grow up and they lose that thing. And even though that thing's still there, it doesn't have the same appeal anymore. Like you've got those toys, but you don't play with them in the same way anymore. Or even this whole thing of Woody is the cowboy, and in Hollywood history, right? The cowboy westerns ultimately get replaced by the spaceman, by science
Yeah.
fiction films and the blockbusters that you get from the 70s onwards. And so it's like this film and then the franchise itself that on a narrative level and a thematic level is very concerned with this idea of nostalgia and the inability to stay in a particular moment forever, ultimately
Mm.
is doing that to Hollywood itself, right? And like, I don't know if
Yeah.
anybody's written on that with Toy Story, but it seems really significant.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you are absolutely right. And I mean it is interesting because like Woody was not originally written to be a cowboy doll. He was originally written as a ventriloquist doll.
Oh,
Um,
that's interesting.
and they made the change later on.
Even a
So
ventriloquist doll would still function the same way, though, as a cowboy.
yes.
Until Jeff Dunham came along.
Right. Yes.
Because it was very, very popular. And then ventriloquism kind of just went away. And it's like, oh, that's something that used to make people laugh. That's a particular form of comedy that we used to have a big appreciation for, but we just don't anymore. But then
Mhm.
it did kind of come back.
Right. Yes. But yeah, no, that really is a great point because it's I mean the film very overtly addresses those issues of Toy Story 1, then it's oh, your voice box doesn't sound anything like this one. This one's all digital with buzz and everything. And
Right.
then in, Toy Story 2, then it's the old, you know, uh, Woody's Roundup show that, is all done with the marionettes and everything. And then
Yeah.
that got replaced as soon as, Sputnik went up and everybody wanted to deal with space toys and space programs and all that. It's very, very overt about those things. And it's again, like Toy Story 1, 2, and 3 are a perfect trilogy because by the time you get to Toy Story 3,
Yeah.
then everybody's accepted that. They're
Right.
like, yeah, we are now the old ones that are going to be pushed aside. And, like our time is over, and that's okay. And it's such an interesting place to be in, and then to find, oh, there's, like another kid who can take care of us afterward.
Mhm.
That there will always be, another audience for for them, right? Like it's uh man, I now want to write a paper on this.
I know, because that's what I'm saying. So I don't know if anybody's actually written on this, but I think that it's something that needs to be thought through more carefully than I've done so far. But I know, like, I can just see it all there, right? That it's like,
Yeah.
ooh, there's a topic that really needs to get explored and really needs to get thought through in detail. And to see those connections between the narrative, the themes, and then what the film itself is actually doing, because there's all kinds of interesting connections there between the essentially like the the function of the film culturally and then what's happening within the film itself. And
Yeah.
yeah, and I'm not, it's because the films, the original three, very much do come to this really mature and beautiful conclusion, right? Which is that even if that moment has passed for Andy, there is this new generation that's coming up. Uh, but at the same time, not all of the toys are going to make it there. Some of them just
Yeah.
will go away. Um,
Yeah.
and that's the thing. Like when you're looking at new technology, is always supplanting older technology, right?
Mm.
And there's something that some of it we won't relinquish. We just hold
Right.
on to that older technology, and we're just like, it's not. I'm not going to let it go. Um,
I don't know what you're talking about. I don't have VHS tapes right behind me.
sure, like VHS tapes, or even like print books, right?
Yeah,
That
yeah.
you could easily have, just all ebooks. And some people just like, I mean, I'm definitely one of those people where I definitely prefer print to an
Mhm.
ebook, or yeah, having VHS compared to
I mean,
having. Go
yeah,
ahead.
even at this point, then, having DVDs or Blu-rays instead of just having, Netflix or other streaming services
Correct.
or, buying the digital version of it.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying, is there's some of those things that people are just not letting go of. Another thing would be traditional radio, like terrestrial radio,
Mm,
compared to podcasts. And as the
yeah.
internet continues to be more and more ubiquitous, that it's everywhere, and data is becoming more and more affordable and having hotspots all over the place. Then it's like you get to the point where you're like, who is still listening to terrestrial radio? And I mean, I do to some, like I do more than most people, certainly more than most people my age.
Mm,
Uh, but even me, like I don't listen to it nearly as much as I used to when I was a
mm,
teenager. Like when I was a teenager, like before I had a computer and the internet, then it's like that's like, and I didn't have a lot of money, and so it's like that's number one, how I was exposed to new music, and number two, getting my cassette and like getting ready to play it when it's that song that I absolutely love and I want a copy of it, right? Then you put the cassette in there and then you hit record, and so you look at some of that stuff and you're just like, oh, well, I guess it's probably like a good thing that we've just moved on, that I can, anything I want to listen to, I can just go to YouTube and then just type it in and I can listen to it immediately. Um,
yeah.
that that just does seem better than the clunky way I was doing it 20 years ago.
Right.
um,
Yeah.
So some of it is okay, but then other parts of it that we're like, no, we can't let go of that.
Yeah. I mean, it's really interesting to compare Toy Story to, say, The Lion King, which came out, if I'm remembering correctly, came out the exact same year as Toy Story, and now is being remade or reimagined, uh, as a completely computer generated motion capture or whatever, product. And we were talking about, like them bringing the lions into the studio and drawing them, and now it's all being done on computers. And the fact that, like we talk about having lost that artistry to the new technology of, you know, uh, of computer animated films, and then they were doing photorealistic computer animated films to literally replace the old hand-drawn films.
Yes.
Despite what they say, I still feel like they are trying to, replace the original in some way.
Yeah, no, I do agree with you. I think there is something to that. I was sure, I'm like, oh, I don't know how good my Disney history is, but I was gonna say no. Lion King I think was 94. I double checked. It is 94. So
Oh, okay. All
yeah,
right.
so the
So a
year
year
before,
before.
but essentially the same thing. Yeah, like you're talking
Yeah.
about like almost that
Them
same
being
moment.
worked on at the same time and
Right.
everything. Yeah.
Right, absolutely. And I don't quite know what to do with that because I think that it captures what Toy Story is working out thematically, which is nostalgia, I would say, is the most important theme in the Toy Story films. And I know that I haven't done a lot of research into it, but I know within the arts and humanities, nostalgia studies is its own thing. And that is, as far as I understand, it's becoming even more popular. Now, I might be a little out of date with this. Maybe it's kind of reached its peak, but nostalgia studies is a real thing. And it seems to be doing something with that. And what I mean is by saying I don't know what to do with Toy Story is that I don't resent it. I really, really, really love Toy Story and Toy Story 2 and 3. So,
Right.
and I love so much of what Pixar has been able to do and other studios like DreamWorks, what they've been able to do with digital animation films. So I look at it and then I'm like, well, I'm grateful for what you're doing, and I'm grateful that we've got this new technology that is being used so well. It's being executed so well in these movies.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I also see how, in some ways, you are kind of the Buzz Lightyear to Woody. That you have,
Right.
like, you are kind of better and you are kind of cooler in a lot of ways. And certainly, if you're talking about cost, then it's like, well, you can do a whole lot more, as far as I understand, for a much lower cost. Do I have that right?
I believe so. I mean, yeah, it totally depends on, how photorealistic you want to
Right.
go or stuff like that. But in general, I would say yes. And one of the reasons why it's frustrating to me that we've lost, hand-drawn animation is because Disney was the king of hand-drawn animation,
Yeah.
and they bought Pixar. So they
Yes.
had a computer-generated studio as part of their empire, and then they still transitioned their own
Yeah.
animation studio to the same thing that they already had with Pixar, except not as good.
Yeah, like I don't understand what the business decision was behind that because I know that it was a real conversation in the 90s. I do remember this.
Mhm.
And the conversation was essentially like I say, mostly it was fear. Is Disney going to switch over to this? Are we ever going to get traditionally animated films again from Disney? And I don't know why they did that. Like, was the thinking, like, was it an economic decision, just a purely business decision, or was it a like through focus groups and things like that, by getting like test audiences with kids, and then them going, this is boring, I don't like this animation, I want, like, not the kids would say animation, but you know what I mean, I don't like the way that looks, I like the way that looks.
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned, I believe The Princess and the Frog
Yeah.
was the most recent one, hand-drawn feature film that Disney did, and I know that it underperformed at the box office. So I think that that would possibly be the last nail in the coffin, even though you can say, well, it's not because it's hand-drawn that it failed. Then, from an executive point of view, from a studio point of view, then I could see them, taking that and be like, well, that's it. We're just gonna like keep investing in these computer animated ones then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, all right, I've got a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that Toy Story would be just as good of a film if it was traditionally animated?
Ooh. That is a very interesting question. I want to say yes, just because there's still so much heart to the
Me too.
story. Like yeah, there's I don't watch Toy Story for the animation, and I
No.
mean, as much as I say, like I honestly do believe this Toy Story holds up
Oh yeah.
as an incredible feat of computer animation. But it does have, things that you look at and you go, oh, well, that's like a little bit too like rubbery or plasticky, and that's fine when you're dealing with the toys. But there's a reason why they don't have very many humans in the
Mm,
first Toy Story, because they just
interesting.
couldn't animate them very well. They were
Mm,
like, they don't look realistic.
mhm.
I mean, I talked about that horrifying baby in Tin Toy.
Right. Right.
They went, let's not do that again.
That's awesome.
Let's see. What haircut should Andy have? We can't do hair. Okay, he'll just be practically bald.
Right.
Same with Sid. What about the mom? We just won't see her face. It's fine.
Right.
It really was, Toy Story was the perfect concept for them, because it was something where they look like toys. That's all we can do, so it'll be fine.
Yeah.
So I think that, you know, a lot of Toy Story is the way that it is because of the limitations that they had.
Mm.
And if they didn't have those limitations, if they were doing hand-drawn animation, then I think that it would have been a different film. But if you're just talking, like shot for shot, line for line,
Mhm.
everything being transitioned from, computer animated to hand drawn, like it's still a masterpiece, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah. That's an interesting point, though, that basically we wouldn't have what is Toy Story if it weren't for the, you know, all of those mitigating factors that you just brought up when it comes to they just couldn't animate people very well, so they kind of have to go to that, so that's partially where it comes from. That's interesting, but yeah, I do think if they had that exact story and it is shot for shot, I think it would be just as good. I don't think that the digital animation is what makes it great, and I would say the same is true for basically every film, like every children's film, every Pixar film since then. um, I don't know, like it there's definitely, like, they are visually pleasing, right?
Mhm.
They look great. The colors are so vibrant. And there's definitely a fair bit of aesthetic appeal to the films. But
Yeah.
if you're talking about story, if you're talking about characters, if you're talking about the voice actors, uh, the actual storyboarding of it, right? Then I'm
Mhm.
like, but all of those things would stay the same, and it's hard to believe that really any of these really popular Pixar films would just not be as great if they were traditionally animated. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's really interesting because Pixar actually recently, as part of their Sparks Shorts uh, thing that they've been doing with their animators, like up and coming animators, then one of them said, "I want to do a hand drawn animation
mm,
for a short film," and they went, "Oh, we why not? So she did. Like she actually, did this hand-drawn short film at Pixar. And I'm like, that is incredible to think that, Pixar, realizes that there is a difference in aesthetic to a traditionally animated film.
Right. Yeah. So with Toy Story itself, there's so many really great things about the franchise in general. I want to try to like outline a few of them. So in terms of story, this just seems like one of those movies, like if you're talking about the first Toy Story, but really just the premise for the entire franchise, it's one of those stories where it's just like, how could this ever not get made? Right?
Yes.
Because every kid like experiences this idea of like, what if my toys are actually real? And when I step out of the room, then they're still doing all that stuff because you as a kid, if you are really active with your toys, as most kids are, and certainly used to be, but kids are still like the kids do still really enjoy actual toys.
Yeah.
And I'm just saying actually because like in a lot of ways, and it's like, oh, are they just like playing video games all of the time? Because
Right.
like you do see really young kids playing video games on phones and all of that.
Yes.
But even with video games, then they still really, really enjoy physical toys. And so I look at this and I just think like any kid who is actively playing with them imbues so much life into their toys, imbues so much personality, so much backstory, so much character into each toy as they're playing out little dramas in their room or their playroom, wherever they are. That it's a form of storytelling that you're developing as a child, and of course you if you are as involved in that as most kids are, then you've got to think, I'm not the one telling the story, that the story becomes so much bigger than just me, and that this story is going to continue on. This drama that I've got playing out will continue on even after I stop playing with my toys.
Right.
Does that make sense so far?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
It's I mean it's 100%. Like I definitely I mean I was, very young when Toy Story came out, and like I do feel like a little bit of the reason why I love playing with my own toys so much was because of watching Toy Story and being like, oh man, like the more I play with them, the more they'll, come to life and have fun adventures without me. And, leaving them out in the sandbox or something, then part of it is like, oh no, and part of it is like, I wonder what it got up to out here.
Right. Exactly. And then, kids, of course, I mean, this might just be like my own personal element to it, but basically, I think most kids, they are looking for a toy and it's not where they remember leaving it. Right?
Yes.
And so then it's like as an adult, then like adults will look at this, parents will look at this, and it'll just be like, it's because you weren't paying attention. Like you're being like you forgot where you put it. But a kid is going to come up with a much better explanation, which is it moved on its own, right?
Yes.
It wanted to go there, and it's like, no, I didn't leave it there. And you don't blame it on another sibling. It's maybe they are real. And so I just look at that and I'm like, so on one level, this is a movie or a series of films that it's like, how could they ever not get made? Because it just seems like such an obvious story. And this is not the only story that I can think of where, things come to life when adults are not paying attention, or things come to life when, people are not in the room. Because like, there's a lot of different stories like that. But this one does it so well. I don't know if you want to speak to that, because I've got another thought with this.
I mean, it's they recently came out with The Secret Life of Pets. I think that was a DreamWorks feature,
Yes.
and a lot of people were comparing it to Toy Story. It's like, oh, it's like Toy Story but with pets. And I went, oh, okay. Like, but then people were like, oh, but it's not very good. And I went, oh, okay, that makes sense. Like, no, I haven't.
Okay,
but I'm
I've
like,
seen it.
Like, okay. I'm like, there's just no way that it can be as good as Toy Story, though. And I think that part of it is because Toy Story is about like it's about toys and like the as you said, like, you know, kids create these backstories for their toys, for every single toy.
Yeah.
I love every aspect of especially the first Toy Story. Like when you see like the hockey puck that's actually alive, and it doesn't have a face or anything, but it's got legs and hands. And I mean, I remember having toys like that where I'm like, it doesn't have like any kind of face or head or whatever, but for some reason it's got arms and legs. So, yep, it's alive.
That's right. Totally.
It's got its own story.
Yeah.
Its own personality.
Right. Okay, I've got more on this. I just wanted to briefly mention this idea that I also look at this and I think, how could this movie not get made, in part because of the obvious merchandise tie-ins that you can do with this. Right? I mean, it's just kind of one of those things that it's like, that would be the pitch right there to any executive. It's like, the toys in the movie we can sell as actual toys in the store. And of course, kids are going to go crazy to buy their own Buzz Lightyear, to buy their own Woody doll and everything else. We're going to make Mr. Potato Head super popular again, and, you know, whatever else. You know, I don't know whether, like, you know, they've got any connection, like whether they're going to benefit financially from Mr. Potato Head, but the other ones, then they certainly can benefit from.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I personally, like when Toy Story 3 came out, and the one of the new characters was Peas in a Pod, which is like they're three little peas that are in like this little zippered pouch, which is like their pod. And you know, all you can do is just take them out and put them back in, but each of them has like a slightly different expression on it. And I'm like, these things are adorable. I want to buy them. Like,
right. Yeah, that's part of it. Is I look at it and, like, on the one hand, then like the cynical critique of this would be, oh, it's just such an overt example of, you know, the commercialization of narrative, of stories, of Hollywood, and it's just like a big cash grab, and you're exploiting kids. And like, you could definitely make a critique of it. But on the other hand, then it's like, yeah, but if kids are really enjoying it, if they really are having fun, where they can go and watch a movie with those toys, and then they can buy the toys themselves, or like their parents buy them the toys and give them to them as birthday presents and Christmas presents and all of that, then it's like, then that just makes kids a little bit happier. And what's the problem with that? Right.
Yeah. And I think that it's really important that, you know, Toy Story 1, then the villain of it is Sid, who breaks his toys and everything. And we're watching it from the toys' perspective, right?
Yeah.
And realizing that, like, oh man, that would be horrifying for them to destroy these toys. Even when Buzz Lightyear, you know, tries to fly and fails and he crashes and his arm comes off, then like, you feel that as a kid, like you really feel that, and you go, oh man, like I don't want to break my toys. I don't want them to, you know, suffer that way. So then kids end up taking better care of their toys and care more about their toys just as a toy, which is fascinating, because then they're not, you know, just like throwing it around or you know, destroying it, you know, or whatever. There is an element of like messaging there.
There absolutely is. Yeah, it is. It's teaching kids. Oh, what are they called when like stories are doing that? I forget what it's called, but anyway, but
like a morality tale.
Yeah, essentially, yeah, a morality tale, right? And that it's teaching kids compassion. And the interesting thing, if I kind of play it through a little bit and try to psychologize to some degree what's happening there, is that kids, and well, I'll just say it, kids are monsters. Kids really are monsters, and you have to learn how, like, they have to be civilized. You have to teach them how to treat other people. Like, kids, they don't have, like, people, generally speaking, except for, you know, like sociopaths and psychopaths, then people generally become less violent and more compassionate as they get older, right? Like that really is a phenomenon that we see. But when kids are little, like, they will, like, throw their toys at like another kid. They'll push other kids. They'll bite. They'll scratch. I mean, like, when was the last time you bit someone? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
But like as a
Yeah.
kid, like kids will bite and they will pinch, right? And,
Yeah.
and like they'll push. And it's like you have to teach them, no, you can't do that to other people. And part of the reason why children do this is because they haven't developed compassion to the same degree that adults have developed compassion, right? And that you have to understand that other people are not just objects that you can just impose your will upon, but they have feelings too. And so you have to learn that it's not like they're just avatars in this game that you can just, like, it's not like a little like Goomba monster that you can just stomp on and it's no big deal. Like it's Super Mario Brothers. But that person is a person like you. And if somebody does that to you, it hurts you. Likewise, if you do that to them, it hurts them. So every time you're doing that, you are hurting another human being, right? And that it takes a little bit for children psychologically, within child psychology, to develop that sense of empathy, to develop that sense of compassion, that you are not the center of the universe. You are not the only one who's important, and other people are actually just as important as you. And therefore, you shouldn't be violent to them. You shouldn't say awful things to them. You shouldn't steal their stuff because you don't want all that stuff happening to you. And it's like, well, it's the same thing when it comes to objects, right? That if you imbue objects with all of that personality, all of that character within Toy Story, then it's like destroying something, being violent and damaging it. That ultimately is a negative thing that we don't want to have in this world. We don't want destruction in this world. Right. And so you have to teach kids those lessons. And Toy Story does that in part by saying, think about what's happening to this object. This object itself exists for a specific purpose. I think that's what is it? The Japanese belief system of, I think it's Shintoism, where it's like that you have to respect objects for what their function is. Right. And it's like it's fulfilling its function. Like that thing was created for a specific purpose, and we should be grateful for it when it is, acting in that purpose. And when it can no longer function in that purpose, then it's a somewhat sad moment, because it's like, at least you fulfilled your function. You've done what you were here to do. Right. That like objects themselves can do that. And trying to teach that to kids it's not just important. I would say it's challenging, right? That some kids learn it easier than others. And Toy Story is not a bad like it's not a worse film because it's doing that. If anything, it becomes a much better film because it's actually got this underpinning of morality.
Yeah, it's really interesting because there are a lot of different messages or life lessons in these films. Even in Toy Story 1, like one of the other major lessons is that just because somebody loves somebody else, right? Like specifically talking about kids, right? Then like just because your parents get maybe you have a new like baby brother or whatever, right? Just because your parents are at the moment giving the baby more attention, and just because they clearly love, your baby brother, that doesn't mean that they love you any less. And for Woody to realize that, oh, it's not a competition of, oh, well, Andy likes me more. It's we can both be, treated like with love by this one kid, and that I think is a really powerful message for kids.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sorry, I froze again. So again, we had another issue. It's my computer. I'm having tech issues on my end. But anyway, we're going to keep going with the conversation. So yeah, the idea that like Woody and Buzz, that they have to figure out how to get along. I really love that aspect of the story itself. And I think that there's I know a lot of people in publishing, then they talk about this idea of like what they're looking for in characters. And one of the uh, it's such a difficult thing to do, and I know we've talked about it before, but to get a character to start them out unlikable and then pull them into being likable, either for the
Yeah.
audience or for other characters, that's really, really hard to do. And like, I don't know how much you've experienced that in your own life, but if you meet somebody and your first impression is not good, like for whatever reason, whether it's fair or unfair, you just don't like that person. And I don't know if you've ever had this happen where it's like you don't like them for a period of time, and then eventually you start to like them, and then eventually you become really good friends. And that is such a weird thing to happen, right? And I feel like it's so hard to explain why that happens or how it transitions, and then to try to write that with fictional characters, I think is especially challenging. I think that's one of the hardest things you can do as a writer, is to be able to do that, to get your audience to start out not liking a character and then ultimately start to like a character more and more and more, or to have characters within your story who have this antagonistic relationship with the character who then start to like the character more.
Right.
That and so Toy Story is doing something there that's fairly, it's a fairly mature thing to try to do from a storytelling perspective, like, and for kids to trust that kids can go along with that. Because I don't think that I'm misreading this. I think that most people are, like, most viewers, including children, are going to watch Toy Story for the first time, and there's going to be resentment towards Buzz Lightyear because he is trying to usurp Woody's role, his relationship with Andy, and he's this new cool thing, and it's like, yeah, I guess he is kind of new and cool, but the thing is that we've got this established friendship. Because you've got that other dynamic too. It's this idea of, like, you get a new kid at school, and then suddenly your best friend is now hanging out with them more than they're hanging out with you, and you don't know what to do with this, and then you just hate the other person so much, and you're like, but they were my friend first, and we have this whole history. I don't care if you know how to skateboard. I hate you. Right? Sorry, that was too much. Sorry.
You've been rewatching Stranger Things too, haven't you?
No, I have. That's actually it, right? That's Stranger Things too. Oh, Mad Max, she's so cool. Oh, she can skateboard. She's from California. Oh, we're gonna talk about that real soon.
Yeah. Oh man. But yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And it's something that they did actually really struggle with. Like, I have looked into all these films so much.
Yeah, because I was gonna say that, like, when we did, like, The Walking Dead, it was like, okay, I think it's fairly safe to say that I'm pretty much an expert on The Walking Dead. You are our expert on Toy Story because you really know this stuff.
Yeah. So when they early on, when they did, like, a lot of the like script writing and, like, like storyboarding kind of stuff, then, like, they couldn't get people to really like Woody because he was so antagonistic toward Buzz,
Right.
and, like, so horrible that, like, people were just like, I don't know, like, he just tried to push Buzz out a window, right? Like, stuff like that, like, it just wasn't working for a while. They were like, oh no, we went too far. So they had to, like, pull back on Woody a little bit to make him a little bit more likable.
Yeah.
And as a result, then we, now we're talking about Buzz being the one that you have to sort of get to like after over time.
Yeah. And I don't think I'm misreading that. Do you? Do you think that most people look at that and they kind of resent Buzz?
Yeah, I think so. I mean,
okay.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. It's yeah, Buzz is, he feels like, he knows everything, and he's kind of like belittling Woody for the first, 3/4 of the film. Or at least like the first half, until Woody, has his breakdown and goes, "You are a toy."
Right.
Actually, even still, then Buzz thinks he knows what's going on more than Woody, until he loses an arm. And, when
Right.
he realizes, oh, I can't fly, when he sees, that TV commercial, not a flying toy, like that is what actually changes him. And that
Right.
is such a compelling moment, for him to like, I mean, oh, it's they did such a good job with the film. But like when, on the in the commercial, then it's a secret mission in uncharted space. And then Buzz pushes his own button and it says it the
Yeah.
exact same.
Yeah.
Oh, like that really is such a powerful moment that like I don't know who wrote that. I mean, like I know some of the writers, but like,
Yeah, but
it's
there's a series, like a team of them, so it's hard to know who wrote that exact line.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean
Yeah,
like Joss Whedon was one of the people who
I know.
wrote it.
I was actually shocked to see that.
Yeah. Um, yeah, there is so much going on in these films, and I love that it is always shown from the toy's perspective.
Mhm.
Oh, and sorry, one other lesson though is when when Woody and Buzz are like in Sid's room and they're seeing all the, whatever you want to call them, mutilated toys, right, moving around, and then Buzz just goes, "They're cannibals," you know?
Right.
Like that's a joke that goes over every single kid's head. There's not a
Yes.
chance that they're getting that.
Yes.
Um, but I think that it still has an impact on kids where, Woody and Buzz are frightened of these toys who look different, who look
Mm,
scary, and then
mm.
they have to, work together with those toys. And that again, just, overcoming those bias, right? Like
Yeah.
such an important lesson for kids to learn that like, well, it doesn't matter what they look like, you have to like get to know them.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. That is another really good lesson that you get with that. And that's also one of those things where your first impression is not accurate, right? Your first impression of Buzz, ultimately you change your views on him. Your first impression of those toys in Sid's room, you change your views on them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So do you want to? I know that we've mostly talked about Toy Story 1. So, what are your thoughts on Toy Story 2, let's say, if we try to focus in on that?
Okay. First, I'd just like to point out that the carpet in Sid's room in Toy Story 1 is the same pattern as the Overlook Hotel from The Shining.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought you'd get a kick out of that.
Yeah.
It's so incredible that they, just put that one little detail in
Right.
there.
Right.
But yeah, okay. So Toy Story 2, I think so a little background on it is that it was originally being developed as a direct to DVD short, and then they
Oh.
extended it to a feature length thing, and then they were like, "This is too good. We have to release it in theaters."
Hmm.
Um, which is amazing, and I don't know any other instance where something like that has happened, where they started working on a sequel that was supposed to be like oh, okay, yeah, we kind of need the money, and then they realized like this is actually like really good, like it has like a lot of compelling ideas in it. This should
Yeah.
be its own thing.
Because it usually goes the other way around. It's
Right.
we were gonna release this in the theater, but it's so bad. We're just going direct to DVD.
Yeah, yeah. It was only Pixar's like third film. And yet you can still see so many improvements from on in terms of animation, and it introduces a lot of interesting characters. You once again have a human antagonist in Al the toy collector,
Yeah.
of Al's Toy Barn. And then you have but then you also have like a toy villain
Yeah.
in the Prospector,
Yeah.
and they're they're so vastly different from the villains in Toy Story 1 that it does make it, its own story. Like it doesn't feel like, oh yeah, and it's more of the same or anything like that. Like it's everything that a sequel should be.
Yes. Agreed. Agreed.
Yeah.
Um, So I've got one thought on this, which is that, and sorry, I should have brought this up earlier, but Toy Story 2 does bring up this point. So Woody, he gets to know his history in this, right? That he
Yes.
was this character from, because it's been a while since I've seen it, but he's a character from this old 1950s TV series. Is that right?
Yeah.
Um, and so then like you learn all about his personality and like all the things, all the traits that he's supposed to have, right? And all the
Mhm.
hijinks that he gets into and adventures he has and all of that stuff. So I think an interesting thing is, I don't know, I'm trying to remember like the toys that you especially enjoyed playing with when you were a kid. Uh, but I'm thinking back for me, then there was a big difference between playing with toys where I didn't know the history behind them. I didn't know their characters or personality traits that they were supposed to have, or
Mhm.
you know what I mean? Compared to playing with ones where I do know who they are. And that is the dynamic between or the distinction between Woody and Buzz is that Buzz is basically this 1970s blockbuster sci-fi movement forward of here's the toy, here's all the history behind it. You know, we're going to tell you all this stuff about who this
Right.
character is, compared to this generic toy of he's a cowboy, do whatever, like you've got free reign. It's like the sandbox approach, right? It's that he's a cowboy, whatever that means to you, get him to do
Mhm.
whatever you want him to do. But then the other approach is here's an established character, he has to fit within those parameters when you're playing with him, right? And so
Yeah.
I'm saying that when I played with toys where I didn't necessarily know their background or their history, like the games I played were totally different than if I was playing with my Ninja Turtle toys, where it's like
Yes.
I already know their names. You know,
Right.
I already
Yeah.
know the personality. Like I know that, you know, Michelangelo, then like he is, you know, pizza obsessed and he's the funny one. And, you know, like Donatello is the, you know,
The
oh,
brainy
like
one.
yeah, and Raphael, he's like kind of like the angry one, and then
Yeah.
Leonardo, he's the leader and he's the serious one. It's like you already have all of that, so it's like you know
Yeah.
how to play with them. Or
Right.
I remember that my our older second cousin Jason, I don't know if you've even met him because I think he was kind of off to university by the time you were even, and then he went and got a job working like doing like GPS or something like that in like Colorado. So like we've had no connection with him. But
Okay.
anyway, he's like easily like 10 years, 15 years older than me, but he had this whole like whole collection of original Star Wars action figures at their cottage just north of Toronto, and he had the sandbox. And I remember as a kid going and playing, but he would teach me all about who the characters were because I had not even seen Star Wars at that point. But
Oh
you
wow.
know, so he was teaching me like any like legitimately these original 1970s 1980s action figures, and you know
Wow.
he's like, yeah, this is Darth Vader, and you know he's the villain, he's the bad guy, and this is Luke Skywalker, and this is Obi-Wan Kenobi, and like he had like just he had a lot of them, like dozens of them, and so
Sure.
he taught me how to play. But that's that. So basically, what I'm saying is within Toy Story, you've got that distinction between Woody, who, you know, Andy gets to decide who Woody is. He gets to
Mhm.
imbue him with personality. But Buzz Lightyear is showing up with all of this didactic information of how to play with him. You know, you've got the laser on there, and he's from this planet, and he's come here to do this, to stop
Right.
Emperor Zurg, and, you know, but then Toy Story 2, this is why I'm saying it's significant with Toy Story 2. Then you learn all of this stuff about Woody, and Woody's learning about his own history. And
Mhm.
it's like he no longer is the Woody that we are used to from the first Toy Story. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, that is it's really interesting the way the way that that works because he I think a great example is like the relationship that he has with the rest of the Roundup gang, right?
Yeah.
When, you know, Jesse and Bullseye, you know, first, you know, talk to him, he is so freaked out. He's like, "Who are you guys?
Yes.
How do you know me?" All that. But by,
Yep.
you know, like the end of the movie, then it's like they're old pals. And you're like,
Right.
how are you old pals with these characters? And yet it's not jarring for the audience because we have seen that he's learned all about them as well as learning about himself. He's learned about the relationships that they had in a past life almost like
Yeah,
almost like a character like getting over amnesia.
that's exactly what I was going to say. I was going to say that it's like he's overcoming amnesia and he is realizing who he really is, or like
Yeah.
almost like, to take the Matrix as an example, like Neo, right? Where it's like he's essentially a reincarnation of the one. And it's like the more he learns and he meets these people that he's never met before, the more he realizes who he truly is.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. You're going like, this is a kids movie, but man, there's some serious stuff going on here.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I have to talk about the absolutely heartbreaking song in Toy Story 2, When Somebody Loved Me. Oh my goodness, like
That's legitimately why I don't really watch Toy Story 2. Because it's just like, okay, stop. I can't take it. I've had enough like stuff in my life where it's like, I'm kind of working through some things, and then it's like it's like I can't handle this right now. Are you kidding me?
Right. Yeah, no, it is. It is horrifically saddening, to see like what happened to Jessie, having her be like abandoned by her owner, just on the side of the road. Um, yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't know what else there is to say about it, but like it needs to be said that that is a beautiful moment of filmmaking.
It is. It really is. It kind of reminds me now. I've not watched the entire film of Up, but it's like that opening sequence of Up,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Where it's just in just a few minutes what Pixar is able to do, that I'm just gonna like go ahead and do it because it comes up every podcast, that the MCU in like 20 films has not been able to do, and Pixar can do it in like
Right.
3 minutes.
Yeah.
That there's a full like character arc, and like there's heartbreaking. You genuinely like your heart breaks for
Absolutely.
this character, and you're moved in this way that is staggering how profoundly you can just feel for this character. Yeah, it's really something. It really is. And I think the reason why it gets to you is, there's so many levels to it. But on the one hand, it's if you've ever felt that happen to you, and then at the same time, if you've ever felt that you've done that to someone or something,
Right.
right? That you're
Yeah.
feeling both of them at the same time. It's like, yeah, this person used to love me and now they don't. Now they don't think about me anymore. Or I used to love this thing and look at what happened to it. Like if you ever come across something, like even a physical object from your childhood where it was the most significant thing to you in the world, and then you find it in an old box and it's kind of like broken, and you're just like, wow, I haven't even, like, my thoughts haven't gone to you in
Right.
years, and I've been off doing all these other things and I just abandoned you, right? Like either being abandoned or abandoning something, that I think you're experiencing both of those when you're watching that. And it's something where Toy Story, like Pixar in general, but Toy Story in particular, uh, I mean, I very not that long ago, then I said, like it's a kids movie, and it's like it's there, but it's not, right? That
Right. Yeah.
they're I guess the best term for it is they're family films, right? They're films that
Right.
are appropriate for the entire family, whether you're talking about elderly grandparents or very very young children, everyone in between. That everyone can get something out of these. That it's appropriate for everyone, and that's the thing is I think for the older you are, the more you're going to feel that, right?
Hmm.
That kids are not necessarily going to feel it as much as an adult is going to really be moved by that. But
Right.
yeah, but there's there's just so much power in that sequence.
Absolutely. Yeah, it is honestly like there's so much there, and it does the same thing as we've been talking about, Pixar being able to do so well, which is change our opinions on a character
Yeah.
where,
Yep. She's
we're
another one.
frustrated.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're so frustrated at Jesse. We're like, just
Yeah.
let him go. Like he needs to be with Andy. He needs to be with Andy.
Right.
Why are you like this?
Right.
And then experience that song, and you just go, oh my goodness, okay, never mind. I totally get it. And Woody has that moment too where he says, like, who am I to break up the Roundup gang? And you just go, yeah, good job, Woody. Like you
Yep.
get behind him. You're like,
Yep.
that's the right decision. And then, you have to follow the other guys as they, Buzz and the gang who stop by, and they're like, what about Andy? And, it is a genuinely difficult decision
Yeah.
for Woody to make. Like, it's so powerful.
That's just it. And the thing is that's tying into the overall theme that you get with the first three films, which is ultimately it's Andy being a kid, being that perfect age, like it's the pinnacle of him enjoying his toys and imbuing them with so much life. And then by the third one, then he can't hold on to that moment forever. But at the same time, there is an appropriate and an inappropriate way to move on, right? That seems to be what the films are suggesting, that it's like what happened to Jessie and the way her owner just abandoned her. It's like, okay, even if you no longer are a kid and you no longer are in that place in life where that's the most important thing in your life, or that's the most important thing in your day is your playtime with your toys. So you can't stay there forever, and nor should you. However, that doesn't mean that you just move on without any difficulty, or that you just move on in a callous way where it's just like, I don't care about it anymore. I'm older. Like, who cares about that thing? It's that there is a way to move into a new moment in your life while at the same time respecting your past. Right.
Yeah.
And because that's the thing, it's like it's a way of respecting his childhood and respecting what his toys have meant to him and respecting childhood itself, and then saying it'd be selfish of me to keep these toys, to put them in a box in the attic somewhere. And then it's like, but that's not the function of the toys, right? So that's a selfish thing. So it's like, you can't do that. You can't abandon them. So ultimately, what do? It's like, well, you should be passing them on to the next generation, and it's difficult to do that, but that's the appropriate thing to do.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, these films really are all about, abandonment, as we have said, and it's each film gives a different perspective on the type of abandonment that the characters are facing.
Yeah.
With Toy Story 1 being replaced by someone else.
Yes.
Toy Story 2 being, like
outright abandoned.
Yeah, and I mean, in Toy Story 3, then it really is like, well, in Toy Story 2, then it's outgrowing the the toys, and then in Toy Story 3, then it's because I'm thinking of like Lotso, Hug and Bear, right?
Yeah,
who is forgotten out in the park, and then the parents just got a new Lotso, Hug and Bear, and by the time that Lotso, Hug and Bear had gotten back to his owner, who I'm forgetting the name now, but when he got back there, then he found that he had already been replaced in a different kind of way than was seen in Toy Story 1. It wasn't replaced by a different toy where he's not as important. It's literally he has no place.
Yeah. No, that's exactly it. It's that he is this meaningless duplicate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's like, in some ways that's even worse than being replaced by, something that's like better and newer and it's got more gadgets or whatever. It's just like it's what Saint-Exupéry talks about in Le Petit Prince and The Little Prince, where he talks about the idea of being tame, and being tame is having a name where somebody recognizes you out of everyone else who looks like you, right? It's
Right.
that,
Yeah.
the reason why the fox in that is important is because even though that fox might look like all other foxes, and it's like, but not to me, because I know its name, because I've named it and it knows me, and we have a relationship, and relationship is what distinguishes it from all of the other things. It's like if you went there, like if you went to a toy store and it's like, we've got your version of Woody, but then there's like 1,000 others. And it's like, yeah, but you don't just want to replace yours with the other one. It's like, but I've given this one meaning and this one is mine. And it's that relationship. And yeah, to see that though, that it's this idea of you are just redundant, that person doesn't even like know or care that it's a different edition, right?
Yeah, and I mean it's obviously like difficult for Lotso to struggle through that, and it's you you do still kind of get behind him, and you go, well, I see where you're coming from, but you should be mad at the parents, not the kid.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's, you still kind of want him to approach his kid, right? And like, I don't know, but it's, how do you do that without ruining the kid's happiness at that point by, being like, hey, I'm the original, and then it's like, that's actually the fake, which is just going to cause more confusion for the kid, and the kid has, not associate. I mean, it's so fascinating to talk about these films because there's a lot of like metaphorical stuff, and then there's stuff that's like very very literal, in terms of like toys. Then like you can totally see that, but I mean that does also apply to pets, right? Like
absolutely.
And you have to wonder, in terms of because we get to see Lotso's perspective on this, right? And it's like any parent who replaces, like the fish that died with another fish, then it just kind of makes you think about it. You're like, huh, like this fish doesn't have, well, maybe fish is a bad example because they don't really have memory, but
there's actually a degree there, almost like with the toys, where it's like the baby toys, they don't seem to be as intelligent, right? That because like babies can't necessarily imbue as much personality into it, that there's almost a hierarchy to it.
Right.
Where there's, like there's a fish where it's like, well, how much personality does a fish really have? And how much of a relationship do you really have with that particular fish compared to, well, a hamster compared to, a cat or a dog, right?
Right.
That it's like nobody would say that you can just replace your dog.
Right.
That's just, just get any other dog that looks the same. That it's like, no, it does not work that way. That dog had a personality. We had a relationship, but it's like, a hamster, okay, there's a little bit more than probably like that and a fish.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think there's something to that.
Yeah. So it's a really interesting, idea that I think the film is not terribly concerned with, as we've mentioned before. Like Toy Story is almost best when it's not focusing on those things.
Yes.
But it is there, and it's something to think about. It doesn't really give you an answer about, well, what's the appropriate thing to do there. You know what I mean? Like it's just kind of like
it offers it up without really providing a very direct solution to it, right? And it's like it brings it up with something where it's like a point for consideration. And I think that that's like the appropriate way to respond to this, that a lot of those things that it brings up, it's, well, what is the appropriate way to deal with, physical objects from your past, right? How do you let them go if you're just not in that place anymore? And it's like, it's not saying, well, this is the one correct approach to deal with this, but saying, hey, this is actually a difficult thing. You should probably work through this, right? And you should,
Right.
like, you should, but you should be careful in how you work through it. Like, you shouldn't just, you know, randomly discard it at the side of the road. Same thing when it comes to like pets. Like, if you have a pet that dies, then how do you honor and respect the relationship that you've had with that pet? And at what point do you move on and get a new pet? And how do you deal with that if you have kids, or relationships that you've had in the past, and like not just romantic relationships, but those included, but relationships with other people where it's like, oh, well, I'm just not in the same place anymore, right? So it's like somebody that we used to have a lot in common, but we don't anymore. And so what's the appropriate way to respect the past there, while at the same time moving on into the future? And yeah, like, because you don't want to be callous, because that's not good for you, and it's not good for the other person. But at the same time, you can't just hold on to something from the past just because it's like, well, it has a long history, so therefore, even if it's not healthy for me anymore, I need to maintain that relationship.
Right. Yeah, it's I do like the like bringing in like relationships, and I know you said like not just romantic relationships, but it makes me think about them, where Lotso's story, for example, is it's almost like, when somebody has to move away, right? And they are doing everything they can to make it back to the person. And then when they finally get there, they find that the other person is in another relationship.
Yeah.
And it's just being like completely replaced. And then they go, okay, well, that's it. That's the end of my life. And, I'm going to be a completely different person now. Like, that's the path that Lotso takes.
Yeah.
And it's Woody, and it's, all these others who are trying to say, like, no, you don't necessarily need to be tied down to that one relationship that didn't work out, or that, that had its time and is now past.
Yeah.
Because, Woody and Buzz and everybody, then they realize that their time with Andy is over.
Yeah.
And that's okay. And that they can, start this new relationship with Bonnie.
Yeah.
And that it can be, it can give them just as much energy, life, when excitement as, the relationship that they had with Andy. And they, are trying to convince Lotso of that in a lot of ways. So
yeah, that's exactly it. It's that they're trying to help him legitimately, and it's essentially like, yeah, I know that you're really emotionally damaged from this, but you don't have to stay broken forever. That there is a way to get over this, and you don't just have to be bitter and angry, and to just let that wound from the past just completely change you forever, right? But the really interesting thing, I would say, with Toy Story 3 is he doesn't get redeemed.
Right. Yeah, he absolutely does not.
Like, that's pretty daring for a family film, right?
Right. Yeah.
And I think it's important, because I think that's a hell of a lesson that a lot of people, and not just children, need to learn, but people of any age, is that you need to look at that and say, okay, you really believe in this person, you really care about this person, you really want to see them be okay, but you also have to accept that it just might not happen. And that you can't, because I mean, there's like, that's, I don't know, I mean, maybe there's other ways of reading that, but with Lotso, like, it's definitely he, like I say, he doesn't get redeemed, and that's pretty significant.
Yeah, no, I mean, they gave him, opportunity after opportunity to like they saved him in the garbage compactor.
Yeah.
And then he still just turned around and went, okay, thanks for helping me, bye, you're all gonna die.
Yeah.
Which is horrifying. And there is this element of karma or payback as he gets, just attached to the front of this garbage truck, presumably to just live that way forever until he literally falls apart at the seams. But because as we've discussed, like, what kills them? I don't.
Well, that's exactly it.
But yeah, no, I mean, it is. Thinking more about it, like, the fact that he finds a home at Sunnyside where it's just this, revolving door of kids. If we think about it in terms of romantic relationships, it's almost like he's, just searching for physical, pleasures, if you will.
Yeah,
Um, just like, okay, this one's given me, what I wanted, on to the next one, on to the next one.
that's right.
And you've definitely seen that, like everybody's seen that in, other people where you look at them and you go, you're doing like this, just going between different relationships too quickly. You're not even trying to find someone to settle down with, even though you're doing this because you had such an intense relationship with one person before.
That's right. Yeah, it's that fear of getting hurt again. So ultimately,
Mhm.
you avoid the risk of that. And I think you're right that there is something to that as well. That yeah, it's having that physical interaction with these kids without having a real relationship, right? And
Yeah,
that ultimately that is really empty and shallow in comparison to a deep and profound relationship that you can have with one person, right?
hmm
That kind of intimacy, that it's like he doesn't want to have that kind of intimacy anymore.
yeah, and I mean it's interesting to see the characters around him, such as Big Baby, who is essentially an enabler, right? Big Baby stays friends with Lotso throughout all that time because
Yeah,
they had the same owner originally, and
yeah,
it's just like, yeah, okay, I guess this is what we're gonna do. Like, we're just gonna be part of this until Woody and the gang are able to convince Big Baby otherwise to
yeah,
finally, say, no, you know what, this is not the right way to go. You've actually damaged me by doing your behavior.
correct.
And it's wonderful to see that. But then you also see the other side of it with the clown toy. I can't remember his name right now. Chuckles?
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah.
I think
Forgot
it's
about him.
Chuckles,
Yeah,
who he gets completely removed from the situation, and he's just like, yeah, I got out, I'm done, I'm not gonna like he gave up on Lotso and gave up on trying to help. So it's interesting because you actually get to see those two different relationships,
right,
friendships
right.
there.
Yeah, you really do. And that's one of the things that's so great about Pixar films in general is that you have it doesn't end up being heavy-handed, even though you still get really important themes and heavy moments, right? But it's never
Yeah,
heavy-handed in saying, this is the way to approach this particular issue. Instead, it's
right.
just saying, look, you can take different approaches and, there's kind of strengths and weaknesses, but like what it seems to be calling for more than anything, I'm repeating myself here, but it's that you should just really be thoughtful about that, right? That you should
hmm
think through what exactly are you doing and, what are your options and what is ultimately providing for the most good for you and for other people in your life, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Man, who knew that these films about what toys do when kids aren't around could be so profound.
Right.
Like, outside of the honestly geniuses who, like, script writing geniuses who came up with this,
Yeah.
who were able to bring this to life. I don't know who would have predicted that such an idea could lead to, I mean, such discussions as we've had, all these different thoughts and profundity, like it.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, we should probably wrap this up pretty soon here. So I just wanted to do a couple things. So do you have what are like let's say one or two of your favorite moments from all of Toy Story, like in all
Ooh,
three films so far?
okay. I think
If you need a minute,
Honestly,
I've got mine.
Okay, yeah, you can go ahead.
Okay, so I've got two. The first one's from Toy Story 1. I don't know what they're called, but the three-eyed guys in the claw machine at Pizza Planet.
Yes,
What
the little green men.
the little
They're
green men.
literally called little green men, and they yeah, or LGMs for short.
Yeah. So those guys, they are so terrific with like their worship of the claw, and like the claw chooses us, and it's like, goodbye, my friends, I'm going to a better place, or
The claw chooses who will leave and who or who will stay and who will go.
right. Just this worship of it. And yeah, it's this like primitive religion that they have. Yeah. Those guys, like, I don't know. There's something so funny to me about this that they're almost like a cult. Right.
Yeah.
And like they're all identical. They're all wearing the same thing. And then the way they just worship this thing where it's like, you definitely shouldn't be worshiping that thing. That's not how this works. But but it's very, very funny because how else would they view this if that's your entire world right there?
Yeah.
And by the way, I've started noticing, I don't know whether you've seen it or not, but I don't know who's selling it, but there's some store, a series of stores that are now selling Pizza Planet merchandise. Like I've seen people literally wearing Pizza Planet shirts, and I'm like, that is amazing.
Oh my goodness. I mean, I could see people getting it like at Toy Story Land at Disney.
Maybe that's where it's coming from.
Yeah.
Because I've seen it around here, like in Central Florida. So that could be that people have legitimately been going to Disney. So,
yeah.
But yeah, I just thought that you would enjoy that. Like, you should definitely get some Pizza Planet merchandise.
Oh, absolutely.
For sure. So that would be like my first one, and the other one that I absolutely love is Michael Keaton playing Ken when he is trying on all the different outfits.
Michael Keaton is always amazing.
That's right. He really is. He really is. He's terrific in absolutely everything, and just the
when
way
he's being tortured.
Yeah. I mean, just
no, that's a vintage 1970s movie.
That's right. That's right. The way like his ridiculous I don't know how exactly to describe him other than like just ridiculously like vain and self-absorbed, but he revels in fashion, and it's like if Ken were had a real personality, that is who Ken would be. And it's so funny. And yeah, that obsession with fashion and just the enthusiasm. Like, I think that's it. Just like that is the most important thing in his world is just looking good and talking about clothes. It's I love that whole thing.
Yeah. Okay. So a couple points before I get to my great moments. Then, one is that Barbie. They had approached Barbie, like the Barbie Corporation. I think it's owned by Mattel.
I believe so.
But anyway, like Pixar approached them and said, "Hey, can we use Barbie in our film about toys?" This was when they were making Toy Story 1, and Barbie said no.
Oh.
They said no, you can't. So Barbie is not included until Toy Story 2. They have other like Barbie-ish dolls in the first one, but then you get tour guide Barbie and everything in Toy Story 2. The other thing that I would like to point out, apparently Barbie and Ken are actually named after a brother and sister. So yeah, the inventor of Barbie, named, oh yeah, this will be Barbie and this will be Ken. And then I guess somebody later on was like, they should be in a relationship.
Oh man, that's uncomfortable.
Yes. I'm getting to my great points. I think I'm going to try to pick one from each. So from Toy Story 1, I think it has to be... oh man, there are so many great moments. I'm going to pick Drunk Drunk on Tea Buzz Lightyear.
That's pretty great. Mrs. Nesbit?
Yes. God! Oh, God!
That actually...
One
yeah,
minute you're saving the whole galaxy.
Yeah.
Next minute, sucking down Darjeelia with... It's just like, it's so good. And then, okay, so Toy Story 2, if I'm thinking funny moments, it has to be the outtakes during the credits. And one in particular that stands out is the running joke of Mr. Potato Head. Mrs. Potato Head keeps giving him more and more stuff to take with him on the trip.
Right. Right.
And here's some Play-Doh.
Yeah.
And here's a key. I don't know what it's for, but you never know.
That's exactly how kids are too, right? Like they'll have things like that. They'll have a key. They don't even know what it's for. And it's like, we'll just have that too.
Yeah. And some monkey chow. Monkey chow? What do I need monkey chow for? Well, for the monkeys!
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah, the relationship between those two is so great.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. And for Toy Story 3, I feel like the humor is a little downplayed in that one. So it's a little difficult to pick a humorous moment. But I really like the oh man, I can't even think of what it's referencing now, but like the telephone that's like giving Woody the whole like, first you got to do this, then you got to do this, like the prison escape.
Oh yes, yeah.
Like that is, oh, it is so fantastic.
I love the monkey that just freaks out. Yeah, that's pretty great.
The eyes bulge out and everything.
Yeah.
Oh man.
It's legitimately terrifying, and at the same time you're like, that is the toy that you need to use as the as the alarm.
Okay, so those are my comments.
That's terrific. That's great. So I guess we'll say that we're done then, and then as soon as we're both able, then we'll go and see Toy Story 4 and we can do a review podcast on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I am still excited for it, even though, as I said, I do feel like Toy Story 1, 2, and 3, that's a perfect trilogy. And I'm, let's say anxious.
Yeah.
About what's going to happen.
Be as brief as possible, but do you know why they made Toy Story 4 aside from money?
So part of the inspiration for it was John Lasseter and how he met his wife. Then they wanted to do a story kind of similar to that, and they originally described this as more of a romantic comedy. That Toy Story 1, 2, and 3 would be its own trilogy, and then this was going to be a different kind of film that would be more of a romantic comedy with Woody trying to find Bo Peep.
Okay.
After the allegations came out against John Lasseter, and he was eventually let go from Pixar and Disney, then I think they kind of changed focus a little bit, which is why now all the marketing is kind of around Forky and Duck and Bunny, I think their names are.
Right.
So I don't know how much of that original, romantic comedy idea is still left. But that was the jumping off point.
Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense.
Yeah, I know. When I heard that, I was like, okay, yeah, I can get behind this. And then, seeing the original promos, then, I tweeted about, after the first teaser trailer came out, and, they had all the characters dancing, hand in hand. And then you see there who freaks out.
Yeah.
And then all the toys go flying. And I tweeted the quote from Rex during that moment: "The panic is attacking me." Right. And yeah, so when I saw that, then I used the hashtag like "Where's Bo Peep?" Partly in reference to the Star Wars Force Awakens hashtag of "Where is Luke?"
Yeah.
And yeah, eventually then they did start including Bo Peep in more of the advertising, but it still took me by surprise. I'm hoping that the film will really take me by surprise. I am excited for it. There have been good things so far. Like people have been saying good things so far, so we'll see.
Yeah, and I haven't heard the numbers, but I've just heard generally that it is doing really, really well.
Yeah, which I mean is to be expected. I know that it was the #1 movie in Canada this past weekend.
Yeah.
So.
But yeah, so when we get a chance, then we'll go and watch that, and then we'll do our review on it.
For sure.
Yeah. All right, folks. Well, thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.
Bye.
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 Feel free to exit there, or there, depending on whether you're using a Mac phone or a PC.
Bye.
Either of the coins.
Make sure to put all comments in the comment section below.
That's right.
Thank
below.
you.
Thank you. Thumbs up.
Bye.
Please give us thumbs up. Click subscribe. Click subscribe. Do you think they're still here? My cheeks are starting to hurt.
Know.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Bye, folks.
Yeah.
Bye.
Oh, done.
We'll say we're
My
done.
teeth are killing me.
Stop watching us, weirdos. We're done. Bye.
Ignore the bell, people. We're gonna keep going. We're still ignoring it. Don't worry. I don't know what that. I think that's the fire drill. All right. We're gonna go home. Yeah. All right. We're done.